Hi everyone, Stepan here. Today we are looking at the From Gambit or the From Gambit, one of the most aggressive and interesting gambits that I've come across in my repertoire. So I play the bird or the bird's opening fairly regularly with white in training games because I'm trying to play sharp positions. And if black plays d5, playing into a reverse Dutch, or if they play c5, I will play the Grand Prix. I'm feeling very confident, I know the positions with both sides and everything's fine. But the From's Gambit is a completely different story. Black is sacrificing a pawn in order to get a huge initiative going and in order to exploit the fact that this diagonal is weak. If there was no g-pawn on the board, queen h4 would be checkmate immediately, the king has nowhere to go. So I'm going to show you all the traps, all the tricks, all the ways black can try to complicate the position. I'm going to focus on the patterns first, but I'm also going to show you how white can make sure to have a solid position and an advantage. A disclaimer, it's going to involve a lot of learning if you play this with white. If you play it with black, then you're risking being slightly worse, but you can win the game quickly. Okay, so once again, the idea is to get to the h4 square and just get rid of white's defenders of the king. In a sense, this is very, very similar to the well-known Staunton Gambit e4 against the Dutch. And the Staunton Gambit is basically the same position, but white also has a pawn on d4. Regular Dutch, anti-Dutch idea. So if you play the Staunton Gambit with white, the Froms may be a weapon for you. So e5, white takes that pawn. Now, there are ways not to take the pawn, and after black plays the move d6, white can not take, white can play knight f3 and just enter a normal position, but we're not going to be covering that because that's not the From's Gambit. Basically, white can decline, and this should be just equal. The engine gives all zeros. I would take black if I could because white is missing the f-pawn, but that's another story. So f takes e5. Now, black usually plays d6, and white takes that pawn. I'll just show you the types of tricks black could play for that don't work just yet. But let me just show you. Queen h4 check, and white plays g3, the only move that prevents mate. And now you can actually get away with a move like bishop e7. The queen is immune. If you take, this is the checkmate I was mentioning previously. So this is what black is trying to do. Of course, queen h4 doesn't work, and on g3, bishop e7, you don't have to take the queen. You can play knight f3 and you're winning. So, okay, let's forget about that. So black plays d6. Now, I'm going to show you the main lines first. Then I'm going to show you the rare moves for black. I'm going to show you all the side lines that you have to know with white. And I'm also going to show you alternatives for white in the main lines. We are going to be playing these positions out against Nocti to see how a human-like AI will fight us. I'm going to determine its strength. So we will see whether my theories stand. So e takes d6. All right, black has to just take this pawn. Now, white has basically one good move. Knight f3. We have to cover the h4 square. I'll show you a couple of moves that lose immediately. For example, e4, you can resign, queen h4 check. Now you have two moves, king e2 that runs into queen takes e4, or g3 that runs into bishop takes g3 and you're getting mated. You don't even have to take the rook, just queen takes g3, king e2, bishop g4 check. I don't know, knight f3 is probably the only move, queen takes, and this is mate, for example. If you try d4 instead of e4, now once again, you are losing, queen h4 check. You have two moves, g3, which is awful, and king d2, which loses the d-pawn with check. So if g3, for example, then once again, bishop g3. Now we do take the rook, there is no mate because there's still a pawn on e2, and of course, white is completely busted. Another move white may try is knight c3, losing, queen h4, and this is just mate. It's g3 is the only move that prevents mate. You can be flashy and take with the queen and checkmate. So the position, if you don't know it as white, is extremely scary. So play the move knight f3 when this happens. You're now covering against queen h4 check. That's the main thing. And What black has to try to do is get rid of this knight in order to continue with the attack. I mean, if we look at the pieces, black's pieces are all looking towards our king's side, so the knight could come out to f6 or h6, the pawns are going to start marching forward, the other knight is coming to c6 and then to one of these two squares if allowed. White has to be extremely careful. If you survive, you're up a pawn. If you mess up, you resign. So black's most common idea is g5. Why g5? Because g4 is just winning. If we don't do anything, let's say we make a random move, then g4 and black is winning. If you move the knight, let's say you move the knight, then queen h4 is checkmate. Again, same checkmate. Okay, so on g5, white goes g3. The idea is, after g4, we are preventing queen h4 check. Okay, black plays g4. Now, we have another weakness. By playing g3, we have created a hook, a target for black to try and undermine. So black's next plan will be h5, h4, again getting to the same diagonal, trying to play for queen h4, using the fact that this rook is opposite our rook on h1. And if we allow h5, h4 takes, firstly, bishop takes is checkmate, secondly, the rook is hanging, even if bishop takes wasn't checkmate. So what we have to do is we have to play knight h4. The reason we play knight h4 is so that this pawn is blocked. Okay, now black has to do the same thing again. Black needs to get rid of this knight. So knight e7, the only move that makes sense. The idea is knight g6, getting rid of the knight. Okay, at this point we have two possibilities. The main line is d4, and I prefer the main line. But there's an idea to play for knight c3, knight e4 very quickly, without moving the d-pawn, to try and challenge this bishop and defend this pawn. We are going to have a look at both lines, then we are going to play out both lines against Nocti to see which one we do better with. I'm going to be honest and say that I have never played knight c3, knight e4 in a training game. I always play what you're about to see now, d4. And black continues with knight g6. Now, the main line is taking that knight. I used to play that. Now I play a strange, rare move, knight g2. And I'm going to explain all the ideas. So we're going to be testing out knight g2 versus knight takes, and also knight c3 instead of d4. So we will be playing out three different positions. Let's look at the main line first. So you cannot leave this knight here. You can either take or retreat. So taking makes a lot of sense. However, after hg, the h file is open. And there will be many situations, as you can see here. Let's say you make a random move. You're firstly hanging bishop takes g3 because your rook is hanging. You're also hanging rook takes h2, bishop g3, winning the rook back. So this pawn has to be defended. Opening up the h file is not ideal. That's not something we wanted to do, but we wanted to solve the issue of the knight on h4. So we have to defend g3. Queen d3. This is the main idea behind the move d4. It's not just about opening the c1 bishop, it's about giving the square for the queen and providing an easy way to defend g3. Okay, knight c6. Once again, black is setting up threats. This is a threat, and if we take, then bishop takes g3 wins our queen. So the d4 pawn must be defended. Good morning, Lucia. I woke her up again. c3. Okay, black has another tempo, bishop f5. This is what most people play. And queen d3 is handy because it also supports the e4 square. So e4. Queen e7, not moving the bishop back, but queen e7 pinning the pawn. Bishop g2 defending. There was a second attacker on the e4 pawn. And black is going to castle queenside. We are going to play bishop e3. This is what you will get in the main lines. The reason you play bishop e3 is so that you set up the threat of taking on f5 and that you prepare knight d2 without blocking in your bishop. So at this point, black has to save the bishop. And this also sets up a threat. If we make the most natural developing move, knight d2, we lose immediately. This is another trap. This is advanced compared to the simple traps I've shown you at the beginning. So if we go knight d2, then rook takes h2. This pattern now works. If we don't take, well, the bishop is attacked. If we do take, then bishop g3. and we are busted. It's not just about losing a pawn, it's about this pawn being protected and passed and more pawns joining it. It's over. So the best move actually is king d1, just getting away from all the tricks and simply preparing knight d2, king c2, connecting our rooks and converting the advantage. If you turn on the engine here, it's almost +1 for white. And it's almost +1 only if black knows the best engine lines. From here, if you make a few more precise moves like king c2 and knight d2 and rook f1, it's just a very, very simple advantage where we can play for bishop f4, we can play for e5, we can double up our rooks with rook f2, rook f1. At some point if this rook moves, this knight could come out to c4, challenging the bishop. We can also play for knight d2, knight b3, d5, knight d4. There are many, many very strong ideas, and we could actually, after d5, switch to the offensive, and black's king could be in trouble because we have two very nice bishops. So this is the main line. I like it for white, but I prefer what I'm about to show you now. Okay, so I've created a theme on Nocti. You can find the link to it in the description below. And you can add as many elements to this theme later on if you create your own themes. I've added 3 or 2 positions. The main line position with knight takes g6 versus knight g2, and then the line we're about to see in a second, knight c3, knight e4. I want to play out this position with knight takes g6 first. Then we are going to do knight g2. And I've set Nocti to something close to my strength, about 2000 FIDE. So this is like playing an opponent of my own strength. So Nocti is going to try to play well, and it's going to play like a human. So queen d3, okay, I have to defend g3. Queen e7, okay, not bishop f5. So I'm guessing bishop g2 is okay. I can also go e4, preventing bishop f5. I actually like e4 first. Okay, e4 is not good. I wonder why. Ah, maybe bishop g3, queen e4. No? All right. So Nocti didn't play knight c6 first, then it didn't play bishop f5. Okay, let's go c3 here. I need to defend d4. I will just use the same ideas we looked at a minute ago. Wow, this is strange. Why would you play bishop e6? I mean, you don't have a better square, but I was thinking bishop d7 moves the knight and then bishop c6. I don't think it's losing to d5 yet. d5 takes... Maybe it just is. d5, knight e5. d5, knight e5, queen b5 check. Isn't that losing? d5, bishop d5, queen d5. Bishop g3 check. hg3, rook h1. Bishop b5? Isn't that just good for me? Wait a minute. d5, bishop d5, ed5, bishop d5, excuse me, queen d5, bishop g3, hg3, rook h1, bishop b5. That seems good to me. I'll just play d5. Wait, it's not good? Oh, it's a blunder. It's a blunder. Castle's queenside. Oh no, castle's queenside and then bishop g3 check. Okay, okay, you see how the From Gambit can be scary? I thought I had it all figured out. I obviously don't. Okay, so now I cannot take. How do I develop? I want to play bishop e3. Another blunder? Oh, come on. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, I'm just resigning. Okay, so Nocti confused me now. So back to the position with knight g6. Instead of taking that knight, knight g2. This is the second most popular move. In fact, it's the only move that's played instead of knight takes g6. And the reason I like this is because it sets up an advanced trap that most people are going to fall for. Since the idea behind knight g6 was to get the h-pawn going, very few people will be able to resist h5 here. If you turn on the book Most people do not play h5. Most people are going to play knight c6. h5 is even the best move according to the engine, but the follow-up is in no way human. So here you can play knight c3 or queen d3. I play queen d3. The reason I do that is to set up the trap. If they go h4, white is simply better. Now most people here are going to go h4. Knight c6 almost equalizes. And if you go knight c6 first, c3, h4, this is slightly more complex, and there are lines in which black could end up having an advantage, but I still like white. Here the only move is rook g1. And after rook g1 or knight f4, which you can get away with, it gets complicated, but white gets to keep the pawn. Most people, though, are going to play h4 straight away. And now the reason this knight is on g2 is not to take on h4, which would be bad, it's to play knight f4. And now all the counterplay has been stopped because the queen defends g3, so the rook isn't hanging if hg, queen g. The f4 square is supported sufficiently, so if knight f4, well, firstly, if not knight f4, then we can take. We're threatening to take on g6. So takes. Now, once again, if black doesn't take, we're gonna take. So takes. And after something like queen d6, e3, just defending, I don't know, knight d7, knight d2, something, bishop g2, something, castles. White just has an extra pawn, black has no counterplay. I love this position, and this is the reason I play knight g2. That being said, knight g2 is not as sound as taking on g6. So we are going to be testing that as well. Now let's do the same position with knight g2 instead of knight takes g6. And this is actually what I play. Nocti doesn't like it. It gives you immediate feedback. So the good moves are blue and pink and purple. Okay, I'm playing queen d3. Nocti is playing h5 as expected. We have to defend g3. And against h5, we will play... Oh, it plays knight c6. Great. Okay, so now we go c3, and Nocti should go h4. Let's see. Okay, now knight f4 looks very tempting. Knight f4 or e4. I'm not going to make the same mistake I made in the last game, playing e4 too quickly. I also don't want to go knight d2, because then h4. But I could go knight d2, h4, g takes h4, knight takes h4, and just ignore that with knight c4. Yeah, I don't want to block my pawn. And my bishop. But I think knight d2 is correct, yeah. If h4 I take with the pawn, and then just ignore, yeah. And then if my opponent wants to take on g2, that's fine. Bishop e7, wow, that's very interesting. That is a strong move. So now I need to somehow defend against queen takes h4. So let's say I go knight e4, bishop h4, knight h4, queen h4, check, knight g3. That seems good. I'm gonna do that. It also opens up my bishop. Takes with the knight. Okay, I still have knight g3, so I'm not worried anymore. Now I have bishop f4. Yeah, now I think I'm good. Bishop f4 just gets rid of all the tricks. If my opponent takes on g2, then I'm fine. So you see, my knight g2 idea worked better than the main line. I just like it. Okay, so now I'm thinking bishop g3. I definitely don't give away my bishop. I don't know if there were better moves, but I definitely don't want to lose that bishop. Castle's queenside, maybe there is bishop a2. So how about knight c5, just getting rid of one of the bishops? Knight c5, bishop c5, d5, queen d3, e d3 seems good to me. Oh yeah, I am playing knight c5. Oh, that's bad? Why? Why would it be bad to get rid of my opponent's dark squared bishop? Couldn't I castle? Oh, I lose the pawn on a2. Okay. Okay, so I'm just gonna go b3. Maybe that's bad, but I'm not hanging anything on d3. No, this is a blunder. Why? I saw that my opponent could move the queen, so what? Couldn't I go queen c2? Oh, no. Okay, my c-pawn is attacked. I started messing this up. Okay, but the opening went well. I think knight g2 has proven to be easier to play. That was my opinion before we played these. And finally, in the main line, instead of d4, which leads to knight g6, the two positions we just went over, there's this nice idea of going knight c3. According to the engine, it's not optimal, but the difference in the evaluation is so slight that it's negligible, and it's perfectly playable if you understand the ideas. The move also makes a lot of sense. So knight c3 prepares knight e4 to defend g3 and put pressure on the bishop. The same way d4 was preparing queen d3 to defend g3, it solves white's problem, just in a different way. Let's assume black plays knight g6 again, because that's, you know, the main idea behind knight e7. We take, h takes, and now knight e4. And this challenges the bishop on d6 and defends against anything taking on g3 or rook takes h2. So we have defended against all the tactics. And when I first looked at this, I really didn't know what black was supposed to play. I don't know. If I had black, I would save the bishop. It seems to me that allowing knight takes d6 is a complete disaster, but the engine disagrees. The engine prefers f5 or knight c6. I don't think that's a human move at all. Those are human moves at all. Who would play f5 here? I mean, I understand f4 is scary, but we can take and just go d3. And I don't know. I mean, if we go bishop g2, it seems to me that white will have a very easy game. So I doubt that most people would play f5. I think the most natural move is actually bishop e5. It seems weird to move this bishop again, but how can we allow our bishop to be taken? So let's say bishop g2, f5 now. Now we don't have anything to take on d6, so knight f2. According to the engine, this is a slight advantage to white, so black playing with bishop e5 is perfectly fine. And after, for example, c5, clamping down on the d4 square, d4, c takes, maybe knight d3, is a nice strategic idea, fighting for the f4 square. And black doesn't have the type of initiative they normally get. So I think playing knight c3, knight e4 is very strategic in nature. And instead of accepting all the tactical complications, you're trying to play a longer positional game. Okay, let's test this one out. Let's play out knight c3. Okay, so now let's play out this position with knight c3, knight e4. So I played knight c3. Oh, Nocte didn't play knight g6. Do we go knight e4 anyway? Maybe. I also like bishop g2. So since I don't know this position, I'm going to go bishop g2. Because I prefer developing to making random moves. Okay, now we take and go knight e4. So we are basically transposing to what we just looked at. Okay, bishop e6. I like e3. d3. I don't think, well, maybe I can get away with d4. d4, knight takes, queen takes. Bishop g3 loses the pawn, so not d4. Can we play castles? Can we take on d6? No, because if we take on d6, then queen d6 threatens rook h2, queen g3 check, winning the rook. So let's go d3. That's the only safe move. I'm trying to play bishop g5. Yeah, excellent. Okay, this is a great move. Wow. Preventing bishop g5. Okay, so now I'm thinking bishop e3, bishop f2. That seems weird, but I like it. I need to develop somehow. Rook h5. I don't know what to do with that. I'll just play queen d2. I want to see the idea behind this. I don't get it. Okay, f5 makes sense. I was thinking knight c5. Could I be wrong? Let's go knight c5. It's not... Oh, it is bad. Why is it bad? Wow. Okay. So takes castles. Queen a2. Yeah, it's a double attack on a2 and the rook. Okay, this did not go well. I prefer my mainline stuff without knight c3. I will keep playing d4, but you can decide. Now, before we look at some rare moves for black within the main line, I want to show you a gambit that has never been played in master games, but it's interesting. So after fe5, we looked at d6, e takes d6, and of course bishop takes d6. There's a gambit called the Lang-held gambit, which starts with knight f6, and black is completely ignoring the d pawn, so we are about to be 2 pawns up if we take. D takes c7 is a mistake. It's a mistake. So if we play knight f3, we will be transposing to the main lines after bishop takes d6, where instead of g5, black continues with knight f6. We're going to have a look at that in a second. But I just wanted to show you why taking is bad. It's not losing, it's playable, but it's not good. So the queen recaptures, black is down 2 pawns, but this bishop is coming to d6. And there will be this battery on the dark squares that will be very hard to defend against. The knight is also coming to g4. For example, knight f3, bishop d6, e3, let's try to develop, knight g4. Okay, I mean, bishop b5 makes sense to me here to develop with tempo. So I chose that move, knight c6. And now you have to be careful. There is only one move to stay in the game. You have to play king f1. And if you don't play king f1, if you firstly castles loses because of h2 and g3 and f2. Now you can see the weakness behind moving the f pawn. If you play a normal move like knight c3, you still lose. Bishop g3 check. And after hg3, queen g3, king e2, only move, king f1 loses to mate. So king e2, queen takes g2, king d3, knight f2 resigns. So if you are forced to play king f1, that's not ideal. Of course, black will castle at some point or play rook f8. f5, f4 is coming. It's just no good. So if they try this Lang-held gambit against you, just go knight f3. And of course, black will be in a position where they no longer have time for g5 because, you know, the pawn is hanging. So now let's look at some other rare moves for black. So as I said, the move knight f6 transposes to the Lang-held gambit, and I don't think it's scary. I like the move g3 here, although there are plenty of playable moves. You can play d4, g3, knight c3, e3. I like g3. And if black tries h5, which they probably will, we can now continue with knight c3 or d4 with the same ideas. And just the queen is blocked from coming to h4. So let's say d4. That's what I would play. Knight g4, setting up the same threats. Queen d3. If they try h5 now, we can just take on if they try, h4 now, we can just play g takes h4. You never take knight takes h4 because of the double capture. Rook takes, if you take pawn takes, then queen h4 is just a disaster, because if you go king d1, then knight f2. If you go king d2, then knight f2 anyway, just not winning the queen immediately. So yeah, I like this idea with g3, and I don't think it's scary. If they don't go h5, if they continue with normal moves, then we just go bishop g2 and develop and castle. So Yeah, knight f6 doesn't scare me. So neither does the length-held gambit scare me, because I can transpose to it and have to take on c7. Another move is knight c6, which speeds up black's queenside development and prepares to castle. But again, it's not critical because it's not g5. White doesn't have any issues to solve. Personally, I don't think black should be playing moves that aren't g5. Nevertheless, the idea is bishop g4, and we can also get to this if black starts with bishop g4, then they usually play knight c6 on the next move. Now you have to be careful, because if you don't do anything, then takes, knight takes, and if queen takes, there is bishop g3 check, losing your queen. There are tactics here. So basically you have to defend the d4 pawn. You can play c3 or e3. e3 makes more sense because it develops the bishop and prepares bishop e2. And after something like queen e7, c3, completely solidifying the position, I honestly don't see a single issue here. This is the Collie system where you don't have an f-pawn, but I don't really care about my f-pawn if nothing's coming to h4. So for example, castles, who wouldn't take white here? I mean, we have e4, e5 to play for. Not that the black king is tremendously safe, so I like this. So if you are going to be playing the From Gambit, I would advise you, if you play it as black, to go for the main lines with g5. Don't play weird moves, play g5. There are so many tricks and so many traps that anyone below, I don't know, grandmaster level could fall for them. No one is immune to blundering, especially in positions where you have to make a series of only moves. And if you face the From Gambit with white, then, well, choose one of the three lines we looked at in detail. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you got something from the video, and stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.